My name is Abigail, and I'm a survivor of the Elan School. The Elan School was founded in Maine by a psychiatrist and a former heroin addict, and the purpose of the school was to serve as a therapeutic boarding school that specialized in behavior modification. From what I understand, only the worst of the worst were sent there, and I admit that I definitely fell into that category. I'd rather not go into the kinds of things that I was up to during my teenage years, as I like to think that I put the past well and truly behind me, and just thinking about it is honestly kind of triggering. I was sent to the school in 2003 by parents who just didn't know what else to do to curb my self-destructive and selfish behavior. They loved me, they still do, but one of the things they told me before they dropped me off was that some of the techniques employed by the school could be described as, well, extreme. I figured that would mean stricter than anywhere else I'd been sent to before, when in reality, it meant that those who ran the place were completely and utterly insane. With it technically being a school, education was considered a right, but those of us who earned the right were still robbed of an education. The hours where you were actually taught anything were from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., and there was no homework, no tests, no projects. For example, math class consisted of grabbing a math book and handing the teacher at least one page of work. Just one page, then you were told to leave. The rest of our days consisted of almost entirely what the staff called conditioning, but trust me, it was basically just brainwashing. At first, most kids wanted no part of it and tried to resist the kind of stuff that we were subjected to. But any that did that were subjected to even harsher conditioning than those who just let it happen. If you resisted, any kind of privilege you had was taken away, and there was absolutely no way for you to advance in the program until you could prove yourself as a viable candidate, which meant allowing yourself to be brainwashed. This would eventually lead to you being responsible for the conditioning of other students. This way, kids were put into two distinct categories, known as strength and non-strength. Some kids took around 6 months to earn the title of strength. Other kids took years, and some never proved themselves worthy. Non-strengths were forbidden from communicating or interacting with non-strengths in any shape or form, essentially as a form of social isolation to slowly but surely break them down. Anyone who was particularly rebellious, or who tried to think for themselves, were thrown into what was basically an isolation room, where they were forced to stay for months at a time. They had to sleep on dirty mattresses on the floor, which were brought to them at midnight, before being woken up at around 7 in the morning to begin their days. The sleep deprivation broke people down faster that way. The staff members consisted almost entirely of former Elan students who were hired after graduating from the program. That way, they kept it more like a cult than any kind of school. Lots of the senior staff members used to pull into the parking lot in really fancy cars too. I'm talking BMWs and Mercedes and stuff, so they clearly made a lot of money from what should have really been a non-profit organization. You'd think a person would have to be highly qualified to hold a position like that too, maybe with a degree in psychology, education, or social work. But a lot of the staff members had never been to college. Their sole qualification was having graduated the Elan program. And speaking of money, Elan raked in cash based on the amount of time it took for you to graduate. You had to have a minimum of 7 promotions before you were a candidate for graduation, and each promotion took a minimum of 3 months. The majority of the kids never made it past the 5th promotion, and some of them were there for literally years while Elan leached their parents' bank accounts. Some kids arrived at 14 or 15 and had to wait until they turned 18 to legally sign themselves out, while other kids stayed way past their 18th birthdays, all on the recommendation of the staff. One guy was 23 during my time there, and he'd been there since he was at least 16. That means his parents paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for their kid to be turned into a brainless, obedient slave to that program. One of the worst parts was that there was an almost complete communications blackout between us and the outside world, meaning we were not allowed to write or receive letters until we earned the right, and that could take anything from 8 months to a year. When someone found out where I was and wrote me, my unopened letters were ripped up in front of me as motivation to move in the program. Then, When you finally earned the right to write letters, all outgoing correspondence to parents, extended family, or friends was thoroughly screened. It was very common for us to have to write many different drafts until we were accepted for mailing. On top of that, all phone calls to our parents were monitored, and we were only allowed about 15 minutes a week of phone call time. All the while, the person who monitored the call would have their hand hovering over the hang-up button as a constant reminder that any slip-up would result in the call being terminated. As for the real crazy stuff, every morning we were all forced to take part in a ritual that the staff called a general meeting. These consisted of the entire house, which was like 60-plus boys and girls, all screaming at one kid who stood behind a broomstick of all things. A lot of the time, they were forcibly held still by two older students, so they would have to accept the punishment. But without a doubt, the worst part was that they were forced to participate in staff-organized fight clubs, all designed to humiliate one kid who would be forced to fight at least 3 others. Even the kids who mostly followed the rules were forced to fight in the name of good. All it took was one slip-up, and you'd be thrown into the ring as a way of keeping you scared and obedient. A kid once died after being subjected to this punishment too. You can look it up. His name was Phil Williams, and he was 15 years old when he died. Then, for everything you ever did, you had to seek permission from a staff member first. This might sound like I'm exaggerating, but I knew a kid who was forced to clean bathroom urinals with a toothbrush because he smiled without permission. Seriously, I thought it was just a rumor at first until the kid himself confirmed it. I don't think he ever smiled again for literally years after that. He just didn't want to risk going through that again. I didn't actually graduate the program, and I only stayed for 2 years until I could legally sign myself out as an adult. When I told my mom and dad about how the school was ran, they didn't believe me. I don't really blame them, to be honest. I'd put them through so much at that point, and the idea of kids fighting in a literal boxing ring and getting screamed at for therapy is so far out there that I don't think I'd have believed it myself unless I actually saw it firsthand. I think that's the reason Elon got away with it for so long. People just thought the stories about it were all just exaggerated by kids who had serious behavioral problems. That and the staff were so good at hiding evidence of what they were doing that stuff like the kid dying after the boxing ring were impossible to prove. When I heard about the place getting shut down in 2011, I actually cried with relief. The idea that no one else was going to have to go through what I went through was like a weight lifted from my soul. Elon fixed me in a way, but only because I realized that as much as I hated the world, and a lot of the people in it, there were always worse places. And Elon truly is hell on earth for those who refuse to give in to the cult that it is. This story occurred a few years back. I would have been around 8 or 9 at the time. My old bedroom sat facing out towards the street and also happened to be sat next to our front door. It was very small as it had been built in the place of our old front porch. The roof was slanted slightly downward toward the window, which took up most of the wall, and the bed could only fit in one way. It was painted purple, not a nice purple either, like a kid's bedroom, of course. My bed sat facing towards the door to my bedroom, parallel to the window. A closet took up part of the corner between my bedroom door and the window, making for an unusual space. Every night I checked to make sure that the curtains were all shut all the way, as the idea of people watching from the street made me very uncomfortable, even at a young age where things like that shouldn't even cross your mind. Every night I slept soundly, no nightmares, no sudden noises waking me in the middle of the night, nothing. That was until the middle of the year, during a school break. I remember waking to the sound of someone breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't catch my own breath. I was just stuck. I remember so clearly seeing a man stood in the corner of my room, stuck partly between the curtain as if it would hide him. Of course, I could see him. He was just this dark entity who stood and watched. After what felt like hours, I was able to get back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mom about what had happened, and she explained that it was just a strange nightmare and that I was fine. But the way she said it wasn't very believable. These cases of sleep paralysis went on for about a year, taking me up to the middle of the next year when I was likely 8 or 9. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just like I had most nights for the last year, to the man in the corner. Only this time, I could move. I stayed absolutely still, despite now knowing that he was actually there. I could hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was trying to hide from him. I couldn't help but think, has this man been here every night this year? I remember the thoughts I had, how I'd run out of the room and scream for my mom, how she called the police, how this man would be arrested and sent away. But I couldn't do that. He was basically in front of the door. I spent the night staring at him, trying to fall asleep. I'd say that it was around 5 a.m. when I was finally able to drift off, just sort of as the birds started to wake. I woke up and lo and behold, he was gone. The first thing I did was tell my mom. She was already looking uneasy, like she already knew. And that's when I heard 2 people talking outside. I found out later the people outside were my neighbors and a police officer who was taking an eyewitness statement. At around 6 in the morning, our neighbor spotted a man standing outside my window. She called the police, but he was gone before they arrived. Other neighbors stepped forward saying that they had seen him outside in the middle of the day, looking at our house. There were no signs of forced entry, only 2 footprints in the flower bed outside my window. My mother told the officers my account of what had happened, and they came to the conclusion that he'd done the same thing last year. I saw it, and it sparked my tangent of sleep paralysis. The streetlight outside projected his shadow, so it appeared as though he was stood in my room. This whole time, he'd been waiting patiently outside my room. And who knows what would have happened if my neighbors didn't spot him on her way out for work. Just a few minutes, and she could have missed him entirely. When I was in my 20s, I was unmedicated bipolar, type 1, and was dealing with an immense amount of unprocessed trauma. Being bipolar, I was also being super promiscuous and just not making good choices. I was using OkCupid and matched with a guy. Seemed pretty normal, worked at a smoke shop, had a dog, no kids, but was married. Come to find out that they were looking for someone who would be down for you-know-what. We talked for a few weeks and then he invited me over. I was manic, like manic, and I said yes. I walked to the street corner of my apartment and told him where I was. He picked me up in a newer BMW and we drove across town to his place. When I get there, the vibe was awkward, if that makes sense. I met his wife and we all chatted. She told me that she was a registered nurse at the local hospital and was showing me her tattoos. After a while, he offered to make us drinks. My mom always told me to be careful taking drinks from strangers at bars and such, and my dumb self assumed it was fine since I was already at the house. Still, I watched him. He had several mini vodka bottles and was pouring them into glasses. He had a juice of some kind and served them. It tasted like an ordinary, cheaply terrible drink, way too much booze, and was dry. After a while, I felt super anxious. His wife had gone into the bathroom and I was alone with her husband, and something just felt off. I felt nauseous and just overall felt sick. I worked at the hospital and assumed that I just picked up some bug. I stood up and it felt like the entire world had shifted, and I darn near fell over the couch. I didn't think that I drank that much, but I thought that I must have. I grabbed my bag and tell him that I was going to call a cab to go home. Immediately he stood up and loudly said, "No, you can't." He said it almost too fast and frantic. It scared the life out of me and I knew immediately I needed to leave. I told him I wasn't staying and I was leaving. He tried to block the door, but being shorter than him, I ducked under his arm. He tried to grab my shoulder, but I shook him off and swung at him, and my blow landed on his throat and knocked the wind out of him. I took that opportunity and ran as fast as I could out the door into the street. I had a cab number saved into my phone from a really nice cabbie. It was his personal cell number and was a close friend of someone I knew well. I don't really know why, but I just called him. He answered groggily and clearly just woken up from sleeping. I'm sobbing as I told him what happened. He perked up right away and told me to walk to the gas station across the way and wait for him there. Less than 5 minutes later, he was pulling into the parking lot. He jumped out and ran over to me. He had remembered taking me home, so he knew the address already. He told me to have a friend meet me at my house and stay with me. My friend met us there and brought me inside. I don't remember the rest at all. Apparently, I was acting erratic and making no sense. She called 911 and an ambulance came, and I woke up in the hospital with the doctors telling me that I had such a high amount of benzodiazepines in my system that it was a miracle that I made it home alive. I filed a police report and the nurse was arrested. I'm not sure what happened from there, but I'm just so grateful for the cabbie that came to my rescue. Around 2015, I was in high school and I worked very late shifts in the city on the weekends. One night, the subway I was on got delayed, and after 30 minutes of sitting in the carts, the conductor told everyone to leave because the trains weren't running for the night. Everyone on the trains either called a cab or walked about the 30 to 40-minute walk on a bridge in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in NYC. I was 16 and alone and extremely exhausted after working on my feet for 10 hours. I tried to call a cab and they said it would take about 20 minutes to come get me, but by the time it comes, I could have already arrived at my destination. So I decided to walk the bridge, and I felt somewhat safe because there were other people walking a few feet ahead of me. They were also on the trains. At first, I didn't know which direction to walk in as it was dark and there were no signs. I start walking in the opposite direction, and this middle-aged man who spoke broken English calls for me and motions to the right direction. I immediately thank him, and he walks with me from that point. He begins asking me questions like, "Why are you walking around so late? Do you live with anyone at home? How old are you?" I'm hesitant to answer these questions, and at this point I'm super creeped out. Luckily, this girl around my age was walking behind me and the guy and stopped us so she could ask if I knew the guy. I said I didn't, and the guy immediately took my arm and refused to let me go. She was with her boyfriend, and the boyfriend threatened to fight him if he didn't leave me. After the boyfriend threatened him, the guy ran away immediately without hesitation. The couple walked with me until we finally got off the bridge and arrived in a safe neighborhood, and from there I thanked her so many times and told her that I was so grateful. I still think about this encounter to this day, and I honestly don't know what would have happened if that girl didn't save me. I'm just so grateful that she did. So around July or August of 2021, my city was under its second major lockdown where you were not allowed to have any guests over at your house. I had just moved back in with my parents in early July after my lease ended and I didn't renew it. I'm in my mid-20s. My mother was a big stickler for all the laws, so my girlfriend was not even allowed on my big front porch. It was very annoying. Now, the girlfriend and I would often go for walks around a local creek near my house, and we were a fresh couple, so we had certain needs, if you understand. There was a hidden side path attached to the main walkway that goes through the creek that we would sneak off to relieve ourselves. And one night at about 7 p.m., it's wintertime, so it's pitch black in this creek after about 5:30 p.m., we decided to walk to our spot, and my girlfriend was excited and decided to skip ahead of me. I was walking slowly while she was about 7 meters ahead of me. Once I turned the corner into the side area, I noticed that she was on her phone and she was acting suspiciously, checking the weather and other apps, and randomly said, "Okay, it's time for me to go home." I was sort of just like, "Oh, okay. She doesn't want to do anything anymore. No worries," I thought. As we started walking away, she whispers, "There's someone right behind you." I was like, "What?" I turned my head over to my right shoulder, and there was a man in all black with his hoodie on, squatting and hiding in the bushes, staring at us. Where this bush is was on top of a ledge about 3 to 4 feet above the path, so while the man is wearing all black and squatting and crouching, our faces were basically aligned. I immediately exclaimed and yelled, just reactionarily, and this man didn't react at all. He didn't gasp, say hello or excuse me or any of the usual things a person would say if people noticed each other in the pitch-black woods. He just stared at us as we walked away. I asked my girlfriend how she even noticed him, and she said that when she walked down the trail before I got there, she saw the man on his phone, and as soon as she arrived, the man in the hoodie turned his phone off. We left that walkway and went up one sort of close by. Yeah, we're idiots. And we were walking up the parallel side trail, and we could see the man still hiding in the bushes staring at us. There was only a faint light from the moon. Now, while this isn't very scary, it was incredibly creepy how weird and unexplained his actions were. We have no idea what his intentions are, and thank God we spotted him. This happened almost exactly a month ago. For context, I live in one of the surrounding cities around Toronto, which is about an hour drive depending on traffic. I ordered some weed from a dispensary, but I didn't realize it was in the heart of Toronto, so I had to make a last-minute trip at night to pick up the order. I don't own a car because I don't have a license, so I took an Uber. I arrive at my destination at around 10:20 p.m. and the store closes at like 10:45, so I'm late. I go to pay for the order, but my card declines. I'm extremely confused as I literally just paid for an Uber, checked my bank balance, and I have more than enough for the purchase. But no, I can't purchase the product. I'm super annoyed and worried because I have no idea why my card is declining, and why now? My phone's almost dead. It's the middle of the night. I'm a 5-hour walk away from home. What on earth am I gonna do? I try booking an Uber and my card declines again. And I'm in some deep doo-doo. My mind is racing as I go through every possible solution to get home, and I don't have very long. My phone is at 10% and it's gonna die from the cold any minute now. So I tell my friend to call me an Uber after I e-transfer him $50. I didn't expect it to work, but miraculously it does, and he calls it. The second I receive the text from my friend saying it was confirmed, my phone dies. Well, I guess I just gotta hope that the Uber knows where I am, because if not, I don't know, I guess I sleep on the streets. Lord knows. So here I am standing on the streets in the middle of Toronto like an idiot when this man asks me for some spare change. I tell him I've got nothing, and he pulls out a small knife from his jean pocket and tells me, "No, give me your money." Without missing a beat, I pull out my wallet and give it to him, as well as a vape I had in my pocket too. I had 2 toonies in there as well as my bank card and ID. He sees the bank card and takes it out, examines it for a wee bit before putting it back in my wallet and running off down the street. So now I'm just standing there in complete shock, wondering how I've managed to get myself into this situation. If the Uber never comes, I've got no way of going home or identifying who I am to anyone. I am well and truly screwed if that Uber doesn't show up. Thankfully, after not too long, the Uber arrives and I got home safely. To this day, this is the luckiest I've ever felt as an adult. I have absolutely no idea how I got out of that situation. I could have been stranded in Toronto. I could have been stabbed while getting mugged. I could have had to sleep on the streets. I have no idea what I would have done to get home had my friend not clutched it for me in the last second. It was like a 98th minute equalizer, except it was me versus my stupidity, and I just about pulled through. I moved to Miami back in November last year. I was living in Central Florida earlier, and people were much nicer and way more helpful. Miami people kind of shocked me. It took me a while to get adjusted to how things work here. I'm a 21-year-old female, and I moved here with a friend from back home, and she's around my age as well. We had recently moved and didn't have a car, and we're still figuring things out. I went to the bank to get something with my account sorted out. As I said, we didn't have a car, so we basically Ubered everywhere at that point. So we reached the bank, and then we tried to go to the building, and it's closed. It didn't say that on Google, by the way. So at this point, we were frustrated and looking for another bank to go to. During this, a lady, around 45 to 50, walks up to us. She was wearing a hijab, a head covering worn in public by some Muslim women, and my friend, who's also a practicing Muslim, was very happy to see someone else who looked familiar. Away from home, we all look for something that makes us feel at home, I suppose. She and the woman started talking to each other. She told the woman about how we were stuck there because the bank was closed. The lady seemed helpful, a little too helpful. She offered to drop us off at the other bank, which was open, and we politely denied. This was the first red flag for me because who would in a normal situation with good intentions ask two young girls to sit in their car and drive them around the city? She was very persistent, and my friend gave in. I told her in our language that I don't think it's a good idea. She was totally convinced, and there wasn't much that I could do at that point because I didn't want to argue with my friend. I took a picture of the license plate of the woman's car and sat in the back of her car while my friend sat in front. It seemed like the woman stayed in her car. The car was a little gross, to be honest. I shared my live location instantly along with the license plate number with a group of my friends because something just didn't feel right to me. At this point, the woman and my friend are constantly talking about what places to get food and all of that. I was just sitting in the back seat trying to mind my own business, but this woman started asking for our address. My friend still didn't get a bad feeling, but thankfully she didn't have the address on her because we had just moved and she asked me. I told her again in my language that this is creepy. Why is she asking so many questions? After I said that, my friend kind of thought about it and processed it. This woman asked for our numbers, which we had to share with her because at this point we were in her car and couldn't really deny anything she'd asked. She talked about how she wanted us to meet some of her friends and how she could take us out. I couldn't wait to get out of her car. She told us that she was a realtor. She said that she was a movie director, and then she kept changing whatever she was saying all around. It was very sus. We finally reached the bank. I couldn't wait to get out of that car. We started getting out, and this woman got out as well. She went over to my friend's side, grasped her hand real tight to the point of actually hurting her, and told her that she wants to take us to meet someone. Now, this was in broad daylight outside of a bank, but with all the gun violence in Florida, I was still kind of scared. She started pulling my friend, trying to get her to go inside the car, and my friend at this point almost had tears in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes said, "Get me out of here." Now, this scared me too because who did she want us to meet? Why was it so urgent? Was she willing to hurt us if we didn't comply? She was so persistent, she kept pulling my friend's arm. She was a tiny woman, maybe only 5 feet tall. My friend and I are about 5'6" and 5'9", so worst case, we could have fought her off easily, but I wasn't willing to take a chance because what if she was armed? At this point, I tell this woman in a very friendly voice, "Oh my God, we should definitely go, but it's almost 3:30. The bank's about to close. I just got a few things to do and they're only about 5 minutes, so let me go get this done and then we're all yours." She hesitates, still holding my friend's hand in hers, not letting her go, pulling on her. I try to talk to her again, very, very nicely. I tell her to just give us 5 minutes tops and we'll be ready to go. She says okay and that she'll wait in her car. She lets go of my friend's hand and we tell her, "See you," and we walk to the bank. We get into the bank, scared, mortified, and we wait until the bank closes. And we just wait inside the bank. We get an Uber and walk out with a bunch of people who are leaving, sit in the Uber, and make sure that we're not being followed. During the time that we were inside the bank, we got a frantic spam call from this woman's number. She texted us, called us repeatedly. We blocked her number, and we were so scared that we could barely talk until we reached home. That day we learned that no matter how familiar a person looks or feels, always keep your guard up. Because there's good people, but there's also some bad ones, and they come in all colors, shapes, and sizes. I'm a 31-year-old female, states away from home on a business trip. About an hour ago, around 8:30 p.m. here, I had just gotten back to my room from a work dinner. I heard shuffling in the hallway and peeked out the peephole. I saw a figure seemingly outside the room to the left of mine, looking outward. They were knocking lightly and said twice quickly, "Hello? Hello?" Then it sounded like the door opened and closed. I was like, Okay, they must have forgotten what room they were in or something and someone let them in. I walk back to the main part of my room and I hear shuffling again. I look out again and see a figure. Can't really make out what the person looks like, but I see them on the other side of my room this time, and again hear light knocking and, "Hello? Hello?" No, I'm starting to get a weird spidey sense of like, what's going on? I see the figure leave and think, okay, that was weird. Then I again start hearing shuffling. I start walking toward the hotel room door and hear a light knock of what sounded to be my door. And again I hear, "Hello? Hello?" And immediately after, someone attempts to open my door. Thank God I had the cross latch pulled over, not the deadbolt though. My heart stopped as I stood there and watched the door hit the latch and fall back shut. I called the front desk and informed them that someone had just tried entering my room and I'm not staying with anyone. The front desk attendant just replied, "I don't have any housekeeping up there." To which I replied, "Okay, well, that's concerning. Can you please send someone up to check around?" The attendant replied, "Well, there's no manager on duty." To which I asked if I should call the police instead because I was very worried as I started to cry a bit. She replied that I should do what I thought I needed to do. I hung up and cried for a bit, not sure what to do. I didn't want to ask for another room because I was too scared to leave now. 10 minutes later, the hotel phone starts ringing. I was honestly feeling really scared to answer, but I did. It was the front desk attendant, and she said the police were going to be coming to my room, and she didn't want me to panic when I heard someone knocking on my door. I said okay and hung up. I sat there and thought, how do I know this is legit? Whoever tried to access my room had a key, otherwise how else would the door have actually opened? A few minutes later, as expected, I hear a knock. I looked out the peephole and saw 2 male officers. I didn't ask to see ID, which, in hindsight, it actually would have been the smart thing to do, but I was so shaken up and not really thinking. I opened the door and they asked what was going on. I told them all about what I explained above. They said it was good that I had the cross latch pulled over because the door would open if not. And I responded, "It's a hotel. What do you mean? What's the point of the access card then?" And wiggled the handle. We were in the hallway, talking with my door open. Then they took a pause and they were like, "Oh, it automatically locks?" Again, I'm like, "Yeah, it's a hotel." So then they had me shut the door and open it with the key to test, and sure enough, it didn't open without the access card. Then they said it was probably housekeeping. I responded that the front desk attendant told me that there was no housekeeping up here when I called, plus it was 8:30 p.m. Why would housekeeping be coming up at that time unless I had requested someone to come by? Plus, I noticed housekeeping had already been by during the day because my trash was emptied and dirty towels were gone. They ultimately told me that they thought it was housekeeping and to not worry, but if anything else happened or I felt unsafe, to call them. They also said that if I wanted to change rooms, they were sure the hotel would accommodate this. I said okay, but I started to cry and they left. Now I'm sitting in my room, laying under the covers in my clothes. I'm not sure if I'll sleep tonight. I'm also too afraid to change rooms because I don't want to leave this room. I have the cross latch pulled over and the deadbolt locked. I think I'm safe. Am I just being paranoid? Was it probably housekeeping? Or should I be doing something else, different? The other day I was grocery shopping at my local Walmart with my 4-month-old. While I was loading up my vehicle, I heard an "Excuse me" from behind. My cart was very full to the point of almost overflowing with larger items, toilet paper, diapers, etc. So I thought maybe something fell out of my car or I left something behind in the store. As I turned around, there was a woman about 2 feet away from me, which in and of itself startled me. She was holding a bouquet of wilted flowers and was handing me a rose saying, "Happy Mother's Day." Out of instinct, I reached out and took the rose from her. I immediately became hyper-aware of my surroundings and instinctively grabbed onto the cart which had my son in his car seat still in it, and the conversation went as follows. "Happy Mother's Day." Thank you. I need donations. My child is very, very sick. And she tries to show me a laminated but old-looking piece of paper, but it was under her arm, holding it. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I don't have any cash on me to give you. She stares at me for a few seconds. But, my child, I need donations. I'm starting to get nervous. I really, really wish I could help, but I can't. And I handed her the rose back. You don't want it? My child is very sick. You keep the flower for yourself, and I hope your child gets better. Sorry. She grabs the flower from me and starts running to other people in the parking lot. I was really scared and started to almost panic, but I put my son into the vehicle, trying to not touch him with the hand that was holding the flower because of the stories I've read and been told. I then got into my vehicle and locked the doors and started washing my hands with a sanitizer that I kept in the vehicle. I sat there for a few minutes, making sure nobody was around me and nothing was happening to me, and then I filed a police report for suspicious behavior. Maybe I overreacted, and this woman really was looking for help for her child, but the whole situation seemed incredibly fishy to me, especially after she left me. She went to other people and was even banging on their car windows. While I was filing the police report, I watched a man driving around the same area of the parking lot taking pictures of the same vehicle and parking in multiple different spots, then moving. Needless to say, I just got out of there. So this happened about 15 years ago when I was 18. I used to work in a news cafe franchise in a large mall. We got a lot of creeps for some reason, to the point that all of us girls stopped wearing makeup and tried to have the worst hairstyles we could to make us as unappealing as possible, so you can imagine the extent of the issue. I've always looked younger. I had to show ID to buy alcohol until I was 30, so with no makeup, I probably looked about 15. One day, this creepy dad comes in with a son. The dad is over 50, huge, bald, dressed all in leather, biker style, and the son is about my age, looks like a stereotypical nerd, thin, tall, glasses, looking at his feet. First, the dad asked to buy bus tickets. I checked the drawer, which was pretty low, and I had to bend to look in it. This is important for them, but I don't see any, so I ask a coworker to go check if there was any in the back. She comes back and says we're out, so I say, "Sorry, sir, we don't have any tickets at the moment." And here comes the old creepiness. That's a shame. Could you maybe look in the drawer again? You look so pretty when you bend over. I'm a bit shocked, but I just say, "I'm sure we don't have any left, sir." I can see him looking at our cigarette shelf, which goes all the way to the ceiling, and he makes a smug face and says he wants Marlboros. They're at the very top, and I would have to get on the ladder to get them, but for that very reason, we had a box of the cigarettes from top shelves under the counter, so I make a smug face too and pull the Marlboros from there. No. I was hoping you'd get on the ladder and I could have a better look at you. Me, trying very hard not to yell at him. Well, I have them here, so no need for the ladder. Shame. Oh, what's that pendant you have there? While basically shoving his face into my chest. I jumped back, of course. I was really uncomfortable at this point. I now know that the easiest way out of it would have just been to ask a male colleague to take over, but it was my first job and I didn't know any better. So I didn't say anything and was just quickly packing his stupid cigarettes so I can get rid of him ASAP. In the meantime, his poor son is visibly embarrassed, pulled his sleeve every so often and went, "Dad, can we please just go?" But the dad didn't react to that at all. I mean, total silence, didn't even look at him. Finally, the cigs are packed and I tell him his total, and as he's paying, he goes, "What time do you get off of work, honey?" With a sleazy smile. The son is completely red in the face and keeps repeating, "Dad, let's just go," but to no avail, of course. At this moment, something finally clicked in my brain and I remember an interview with a beauty pageant contestant. You read a lot of nonsense magazines working in a place like that, who said her best way to blow off old creeps is to make them feel, well, old. So I smiled my most beautiful smile and said with a sweet giggly voice, "Oh, sir, I think you're even older than my daddy." Well, that did it. He got red, grabbed the son, and literally stormed out, dragging the kid behind him. He even left his cigarettes, so a silver lining there, because I'm a smoker, and since they were paid for and he didn't come back for them, my boss let me take them. Still, it was really creepy, and I'm uncomfortable thinking about it even after these 15 years. I'm also sorry for that kid. He seemed nice, and I can't imagine the embarrassment I'd feel if my dad was hitting on and harassing girls my age. This is when I was in college. My program had about 50 people in it, and there were maybe 4 guys total, and the rest were women. So in my second semester, I noticed this guy always saying hi to me. We'll call him Tim. I thought nothing of it and figured that he was just trying to be nice. But then about 2 weeks later, it upgraded to wanting a hug from me for whenever he saw me. My friends were asking me what was up, and I said I had no clue. It was innocent enough, so I wasn't worried. Then I was in this theory class sitting with my friends when Tim comes and sits beside me. Keep in mind, I'm not close with him at all, we're just acquaintances at most. He tries to get my attention, but then class starts. When mid-class break comes, I tell my friends I'm heading to the food court to grab a coffee. Then Tim jumps up and says, "I'll go with you." Now, I'm socially awkward and I didn't want to be rude, so I said sure. We head to the food court and he stays by my side the whole time. He doesn't order anything, he just came for the trip. When we get back to class and I'm reaching for the handle, Tim jumps in front of the door. I pull back my hand, puzzled. Tim then says, "I like you more than a friend. You want to go out?" I simply tell him that I'm sorry, I already have a boyfriend. Then reach around and open the door and head to my seat. Class goes on, my phone buzzes on the table, the screen lights up with a text from my boyfriend. Tim then picks up my phone and hands it to me. I lock the screen and focus back on the lesson. At the end of class, I'm packing up my bag and leave with my friends, then Tim turns to me and says, "Hey, I still like you as more than a friend even though you have a boyfriend." At this point, my friends turn to look and I'm standing there confused. I grab my bag and my friends and I grab our stuff and leave. From this point, anytime he saw me, he would try to get close to me. So when I sat with my friends, they had me sit against the wall with one of them beside me. When Tim would come up to us to ask me for a hug or try to sit with us, my friend Ellie would say to leave me alone. And whenever I was alone, he saw it as an opportunity. This all went on until I graduated. Then he found my Facebook and tried to friend me. It was creepy. I'm sure he meant well, but he went about it all wrong. I would enter common areas and look around to make sure that they weren't there, or that I was always with a friend. I know it's not super creepy, but it creeped me out, and saying leave me alone or I have a boyfriend was not enough. I posted Not Dad a few days ago as a personal experience I had when I was a kid. However, not far from my childhood home, maybe a 5-minute walk give or take, is one of the state of Illinois' most haunted places. It's central Illinois' answer to Chicagoland's Resurrection Cemetery and its most famous ghost inhabitant, Resurrection Mary. And like Chicago, we have our own local ghost forever confined to the supposedly haunted grounds of what is called the Old State Hospital. This is the story of Old Book. Back in the 1920s, the Old State Hospital was the home of patients with mental health issues. Even those with special needs such as Down syndrome, autism, and the like, as these people were treated as social pariahs back in the early days. It's sad but true. One such patient was a man with no name other than Old Book. He was a bookbinder in Chicago who suffered a severe mental breakdown and ceased speaking. Nobody had any way of contacting his relatives as he couldn't talk and carried no identification on him. Therefore, those who treated him sent him to the Old State Hospital with the name A. Bookbinder, using his profession as his means of identification. He went by Book and seemed to respond to this new name. Over time, Book became a very helpful and calm patient. The doctors and nurses used the competent patients for labor, and Book was one of them and was known for his immense strength and size. One of his duties was to help bury patients who had passed away. The hospital had its own graveyard where patients were buried, so Book and other stronger patients would carry wooden caskets containing the departed to the graveyard, and then by a pulley and rope, the caskets would be lowered into the ground, and a priest would hold a service in the view of patients and the medical staff. After lowering the casket, Book would quietly walk over to an elm tree in the graveyard and lean up against it, and sob for each patient that he had helped carry to their final resting place. After composing himself, he would rejoin the group. Throughout the years, Book carried many of his friends to their final resting place, and not once did he not weep by the elm tree. Age caught up to old Book, and he too passed away. Book was a very liked individual by the doctors and nurses and patients alike. His service had a massive turnout as his still living friends carried his casket to the graveyard. After his casket was lowered into the ground, the priest started the service. All at once, a loud wailing was heard from the elm tree. Everyone directed their attention to the graveyard elm and saw the ghost of old Book crying against his tree. It was the loudest wail they'd ever heard, one nurse would later say. Two confused doctors opened the casket and found old Book's corpse laying peacefully. They then directed their attention back to the ghost, who then disappeared. The service erupted in pandemonium after seeing this unexplainable sight, and it became the most widely told ghost story after this. Years later, the graveyard elm started to slowly die, so a couple of guys went to cut the tree down. However, as the chainsaw ate away at the trunk, the tree let out an inhuman cry. They stopped but resumed cutting it a few days later and had the same results. The graveyard elm was left alone for years upon years. Finally, a company was able to get the tree down, but not without the ghostly wailing once belonging to old Book. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, it really do fart.